Is God stirring you at the moment? Are you aware of God prompting you? Or does it feel like heaven is silent? I guess for many of us, we'll have had all of those experiences and moments at one point or another in our lives, though perhaps not for all of us. For me, I can think of times when I've known God stirring my heart, prompting me, leading me in a particular direction. But I've also known those times when it feels like God has gone quiet, when I've not been able to find God in the midst of whatever life looks like. But I've had the benefit of being able to have a few weeks out of usual ministry, an opportunity to really breathe and to recharge and to try my best to listen, to try my best to be open to God stirring my heart, both in terms of my vocation and calling as a minister, as a church leader, but also as a disciple, as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus. And those of you who are regulars on Sunday night will remember that we had a theme of looking at some of the difficult questions around our faith. And I remember one of them being something like this: should I be afraid of God? And we looked at what the fear of the Lord might mean. And we recognized that we weren't talking about a cowering fear. Rather, we were talking about an awe, a reverential awe, as we recognize who God is and the wonder of who God is. We recognize that perhaps a fear of the Lord might be a total acknowledgement of the person of God. And as I was on my kind of half sabbatical, I found myself getting lost in my thoughts from time to time. Just, as I said, trying to listen as best I could. And I'm a doer by nature. I'm an active person. So carving out time to listen is a bit of a challenge for me. I'd much prefer to be active doing than to be listening, though I recognize that listening needs to be an important part of my calling. So I'm a work in progress when it comes to that. But I found God speaking to me, and it's only been in the last couple of weeks actually about fear. And so I just wanted to share with you some thoughts and reflections that have come to me in the hope that it might just help someone out there. This time when I think about fear, I'm not talking about the fear of the Lord, but I'm talking about the fear that might hold us back in our lives, a fear that might hold us back from entering into what it means to be fully us, to be fully the people God has made us to be. In 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, we find these words. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice. In some versions it says a spirit of fear, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice or fear, but rather of power and of love and of self-discipline. In some versions, self-discipline is replaced with the word a sound mind. A spirit of fearfulness and timidity does not come from God. Though I have to admit that there have been times in my life, and continue to be times in my life, when I find a fearfulness and a timidity finding its place within me every now and again. The Psalms, many of you know I just love the Psalms. Psalm 56, verse 11, the psalmist writes these words, "In God I trust, I am not afraid. What can a mere mortal do to me? In God I trust, I am not afraid. What can a mere mortal do to me?" One of the reasons I love the Psalms is because actually these are written by ordinary human beings like me or like you, speaking words, I think, of honesty and openness, but also words of faith and hope. So this is the psalmist saying, I recognize I need to trust in God, so in God I trust. Sometimes I'm afraid, but I'm going to declare I am not afraid because I trust in God. What can mere human beings do to us? Now, we might want to respond by saying actually a heck of a lot. Human beings can do a heck of a lot to each other that harm one another. But this, you see, is a declaration of faith in God, who is bigger than any human being. God who is more able than any human being. The psalmist will trust in God because the psalmist knows and understands that God is a God of power. I'd like to throw this sentence out to you for you just to play around with in your mind for a moment. Trusting God is a refusal to give in to fear. Trusting God is a refusal to give in to fear. I came across that, and that's been just going around in my mind for quite a while. Be interested to hear what some of you think of that as you reflect on it. I think there's some real truth in that, actually. I've lived with that sentence. Trusting God is a refusal to give in to fear. Is the key to overcoming fear, then, a total and complete trust in God? Is it a turning to God even in the darkest times, even in the moments when, frankly, life does not make sense to us at all? Is the key to overcoming fear being able to say, God, I can't make sense of this, but here you are. Have my life. I'm going to put my trust in you. That's what I choose to do. Last week, at the end of my sabbatical, I led a group of ministers who've actually all been ordained today, but I led them in their retreat. That's something I do every year. I've done it for the last 11 years. I lead that team now, that retreat team. The only reason I lead it is not because I'm more able than the others, but because I was absent when they needed to vote in a new leader. The moral of that is don't miss a meeting, otherwise you end up with all kinds of jobs. But I led that retreat, and at the beginning of the week, so last Monday when they arrived, we were setting up all of the equipment and setting up the visuals and that kind of thing. And we had a little clicker that moved our images on, the PowerPoint on. And one of the team said, we'll need to get some batteries for that in case they run out as the week goes on. So we got to Friday and went to start our service. And of course, the clicker didn't work. The batteries had run out, and we hadn't got the spares. The reserves we talked about, we just hadn't tapped into and had them ready and waiting. We had the equipment we needed, of course we did, but not the power. And the equipment was pretty useless without the power. We were stuffed. We were stuffed until one of the ordinands said, what do you need? Well, we needed 2 AAAs. I've got them in my car. So we went and got them in the clicker. All was good with the world again. There are times when we can find ourselves short on power when we most need, and we can become fearful in those times and ill-equipped to manage life. For me, I found a growing sense of fearfulness within my being. Some of you might be surprised to hear that. Some of you might not. I'm not sure if I show it outwardly, but there was a growing sense of fear around what ministry looked like for me, what might and might not happen, what I might find when I opened up my emails. see what was going on. When I answered the phone or checked my messages, what might be happening. Waking up in the night and not being able to get ministry issues out of my mind and lying through the night and not being able to settle. Feeling at a loss as to know how to proceed sometimes and feeling like I was not fit for the task to which God had called me. Fearful about others, about their expectations of me and their opinions of me. And over this time, as I've reflected on all of that, I've become acutely aware. I've been reminded once again of my call to move in the power of God. To not rely on my own strength, even for a moment. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. That is the gift of God to those of us who follow him. In moments of crisis or opportunity, challenge or difficulty, we look for those extra reserves only to find that if we're not careful, they're not there because we haven't accessed them. We haven't tapped into them. Whoever we are and however resilient we might be within ourselves, and many of us are very resilient, are strong of character, but we have human limitations, each one of us. We are those who have the promise of the power of God for living. The power that Paul speaks of just in a couple of verses in Ephesians that I'd like to share with you. Ephesians chapter 1, starting at verse 18. With the eyes of your heart enlightened, you may know what is the hope to which he has called you. What are the riches of his glorious inheritance among the saints? And what is the immeasurable greatness of his power for us who believe, according to the working of his great power? God put this power to work in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly places, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, and above every name that is named, not only in this age, but also in the age to come. We have offered to us the immeasurable greatness of the power of God. For those of us who believe, that is a gift for us. I wonder where you sit with all of this. So I've shared some of my ramblings and I've shared some of my vulnerability with you this evening. We remember that this power is not power as the world might understand it, not necessarily shown in force or signs of strength over another person, but is seen rather as the gift of God, his matchless power for us who believe. And it's amazing that that is gifted to us, that is there, accessible to us. God's power is able to bring change into our lives in a way that nothing else can. I believe that. It's a supernatural power that works supernaturally. It moves us away from fear and can release untold potential in each of us as we trust in God and open ourselves more and more to his power at work through the gift of the Holy Spirit. This is what I want in my life as I enter into the next journey, the next phase of ministry for me. This is what I pray for our life as a church. And indeed, if you're here from other churches, that's my prayer for God's church. That each Christian community would know the power of God at work within, seeing the transformation that can bring. What about you? When was the last time you tapped into the power of God and allowed that power to so fill your life that fear finds its rightful place. We sung earlier, fear, you've lost your hold on me. And that is my prayer for us, that fear will have lost its hold on us as we move in the power of God, his gift to us.